everyone. My name is Martha Novak, and I'm here with a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. We talk about all sorts of things, don't we? A variety of subjects, all relative to consciousness, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to continue our series on shame, and I think this is probably all I'm going to say about it today, and there's a reason. People don't want to get to shame. And where you can get to it, I think it's very important for you to know what's out there. I think it's very important to do a show like this so you can go, oh, damn it, there it is, and know that you'll eventually be working on that on deeper levels. So it's always nice to know what you're going toward. Of course, you'll be able to release some of the things that we talk about today, but keep in mind that we don't do anything unless we're getting something out of it. We don't enjoy it, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that you enjoy it. It does mean that we get something out of it. We may be addicted to the soothing that we do with ourselves when we shame ourselves so much, so that we can isolate and withdraw and be quiet within ourselves and not see people. And we say, oh, we're way too exhausted, when this is all about exhausting ourselves. So we're going to be talking about that more today. Guys, I'm really proud of those of you that listen to a show like this, because this is really important to, as my mother used to say when she was alive, put it in your brain pan. So, put it in your brain pan so it's in there, so you'll know one day that you will tackle it and be on the other side of it. It's certainly something that is a core issue, and it's particularly a core issue because we don't talk about it. So I'm hoping that some of this will be released for you today because we're talking about it, all right? Let's do a prayer, get ourselves all on the same page, and then we'll dive in. Okay, here we go. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for being here together and the opportunity to talk about shame. We are very open to the next level of release for us. We know that you will tell us. These shows, while they go out to lots and lots and lots and lots of people, are really very personal. And the information you have for each individual, dear God, will come through them. We thank you for that, because this is our healing. This is our process. And we are very grateful for this and awestruck by this miraculous system known as our healing, and our finding the deeper levels of you as who we are. We thank you so much for all of this. We say now, we know nothing, for it is you through us and through all things that know it all. And we open to that right now. And so it is. Amen. Okay, guys. Last week I told you about a great book I'd found. I want to, lecture some from this book. And it is called, it's one of the best books on shame I found, really. It's called Letting Go of Shame, and it's by Ronald Potter Efron and Patricia Potter Efron. That's E-F-R-O-N, Potter-Efron, Ronald and Patricia. Kudos to them and this book. You can get it on Amazon or anything you order. It's a very, very good book. I have recommended that everybody have this book and then, start, pardon me, underlining, dog-earing it to death, and writing in the margins. Because all that is certainly a commitment to you, for you to get through that. A promise from you to you. Don't break the promise, okay? You all, excuse me, I do not have COVID and I do not have a cold, but already things are beginning, because we've had a few warm days. It's still cold as anything out here today, but I'm beginning to have a little sinus drainage. So You'll never know when a great big wad of something is going down the back of my throat, and if I happen to be taking a breath, I'm going to cough. Okay. Can't disguise any bodily functions like that, can you, when you're doing something like this? We're going to not just talk about what the shame-based individual looks like and thinks, but we're also going to talk about how to get around this. Many of the exercises that I've created and taught you through our time together on the radio certainly apply here and can be used here. Things like determining the lie and writing the truth. But there's something that goes beyond that as well. I did it with my class yesterday, and that is knowing that you're telling the truth and you can honestly do what you're saying that counters the shame. And number two, making an absolute commitment to it, almost like a holy sacrament, you to you. And so we certainly did that in my classes yesterday. We're going to talk about shame. I think that the Potter Ephrons have done a really good job here, and I'm going to, they have a list of shame-based thoughts that are common, that people tell themselves. So here they are, and I think that we ought to go on and look at these. You know, sometimes, number one, shame can be chronic, and we don't even recognize it for what it is, because it's our programming. If you ask a fish how's the water, they don't know what you're talking about. It's just around them all the time, right? The other thing is, not only is this possibly chronic, but if your mother and father were shame-based, if your whole family is shame-based, and I see this a lot, then you haven't applied that word to it. Oh, you may have said they were depressed and they were this and they were that. But part of your healing is facing things as they are. Calling it what it is. So, today, before I go into talking about how you can fix this and what to be aware of, here are some thoughts that shame-based people think, and I want you to write down, certainly, the ones you think, or if certainly don't, if you're going to get the book, okay? Here's what what shame-based people commonly tell themselves. I am defective, damaged, broken, a mistake, or flawed. Next one. I am dirty, soiled, ugly, unclean, impure, filthy, disgusting. Next one. I am incompetent, not good enough, inept, ineffectual, useless. Next one. I am unwanted, unloved, unappreciated, uncherished. Next one. I deserve to be abandoned, forgotten, unloved, left out. Next one. I am weak, small, impotent, puny, feeble. Next one. I am bad, awful, dreadful, evil, despicable. Next one. I am pitiful, contemptible, miserable, insignificant. Next one. I am nothing, worthless, invisible, unnoticed, empty. Next one. I deserve criticism, condemnation, disapproval, destruction. Next one. I feel ashamed, embarrassed, humiliated, mortified, dishonored. What I like about that list is those are the common shame-based thoughts. And if you think you are not going to, that you're going to get through shame without listening to yourself and these thoughts and acknowledging that you're doing this to yourself, well, that's just fantasy, boys and girls, because that's not true. We have to realize what we're doing to ourselves. You know, I'm just amazed how a lot of people say, I'm just depressed and I don't know why. I have a perfectly wonderful life. And after 2 or 3 sessions, I see all these terrible things they're saying to themselves. And I have to say, I'd be depressed too if I said to myself what you're saying to yourself. It's really important, you see, that we wake up and we don't do that anymore. So we've got to challenge some of these things because they are just out and out lies. Now, how do you become shame-based? Well, sometimes we come from families that humiliate us and use a lot of sarcasm, which means only one person is laughing. And sarcasm, by the way, is being sarcastic is a horrible form of humor because it is always at someone's expense. There is no sarcasm which doesn't imply that you're stupid. There are cultures that use sarcasm, and sometimes it just runs in families. If you notice that, and you notice that you were using it, the way to stop it is to just say what is. Instead of somebody asking you a question and you go, duh, and then giving them the answer, simply give them the answer. Just keep it simple. Just answer the question. When someone uses sarcasm, it's to build themselves up at your expense. And that's not loving. And that's certainly not where you're going. So families do that. Sometimes families just are full of put downs. Sometimes they're full of personal attacks and even threats. So threats of violence, threats of abandonment, there are all sorts of threats out there. So if you've come from a family like that, without doing a darn thing, you have learned to be ashamed. If you came from the very best of families, guys, there are times in your growing up when you thought it was just wonderful to play in the dirt or whatever it was that you were doing, that you got called on it, that somebody told you that you were disappointment or dirty, or how dare you do this right before going to church, or how dare you do this at the funeral when you're supposed to look nice. Children approach everything as a very openly, as a learning experience. We're naturally very joyful until something like that happens. And when that happens over a period of time, say with a parent that's just already stressed and can't handle anymore, and here we are, right? Kids mess up. Kids are wild. Kids don't know the rule. Kids are everything. Um, yeah. Thank you, John. My friend John said, "What if it's your old man and you're struggling with his ways?" I think that's a great question, John. Here's what happens. At some point, you abandon yourself with a difficult parent. You are just trying to please the parent, or you're trying to avoid trouble, and you give up yourself and what's essential to you along the way to have your focus, an outward focus. So you're watching them, you're making sure that you're going to be all right. You're, if in essence, I hear a lot of people say, walking on eggshells. Okay? Now, here's how to fix that, sweetie. You have given up yourself along the way. So the way to do this is for you to know what I call in my work, balance points. Here are my balance points. I have a lot of them, but here are some of mine. Mine are creativity. I have to create. I like to write. I love animals, all kinds. I'll take care of everybody's animal, and I'll take care of all the wild ones in the yard, as well as my own. I love nature. I love beauty. I have a real appreciation for beauty, so I'm crazy about art and all that kind of thing. Those are the things that, and I love reading, and I love knowing more about subjects that I like, particularly certain parts of history that I think are interesting. I love the Appalachian Mountains and the folklore here, and it's a very mystical place. That would appeal to me, right? So John, what I'm saying is we have to go back and start finding what you like to do. Now, here's the problem. If you are struggling with someone who might be in your home, you've often gotten depressed, okay, because you've abandoned yourself. And if that is true, and I'm making it very simple because a lot of things go into depression. I mean, I've just mentioned all the things we can say to ourselves that are depressing, right? But we have abandoned who we are and our nature. And so what happens to this is that at some point we've got to wake up and realize, wait a minute, I'm depressed. And what depression does is it kind of is a blanket over all the things you love. Therefore, you don't know what anything is. So you are removed from your relationship with stuff that you might enjoy. I often say it's like having a table filled with wonderful things that you might enjoy playing with or picking up or creating with, and you got a blanket over it. So you can't see what they are. They're out of reach. When this happens, certainly it's important to address the depression. Usually depression is a repository for other emotions. That isn't always the case, but most of the time, and certainly in my business, it is, that there are a whole lot of emotions, by the way, like shame, that we are covering up and doing other things with and never getting to. So we can't then get out from under depression and start saying, I've always wondered about this. I think I'm going to investigate that. I've always wondered about this. I have a dear client who is very unhappy in her marriage, and I have said to her, let's get you out from under all of this. That doesn't mean divorce. That means let's just make you happy in your life, in your circumstances. And it's interesting because then we don't focus on someone and make them the target of blame. We're busy getting on with our life, and they can be a little piece of crapple if they want. Do you understand what I'm saying, John? Because I hope so. I understand this this distress in your question. It's not about them. Your life is not about them at all. Even if you're the caretaker, it's not about them. It is about you, darling. That's the truth. So we have to get on with you. Okay? I hope that helps, sweetie. And maybe there'll be something else that you recognize in today's talk. I hope so. That'll help. Okay. The good thing about what we're talking about right now is I 150,000% agree with the Potter Ephrons who say all this can be addressed and you can heal from it. Yeah, it's true. I'm a poster child for this kind of stuff. Good, thank you. Oh, of course, John. Thank you, John, very much. He says that he does get it. I'd love hearing from you all. You know I do, and thank you. I'm glad that you're hearing it. So, for God's sake, John, you're here for a reason. There is meaning to your life. But you don't think there is when we abandon ourselves like this. And we abandon ourselves because, we have sometimes, I'm not saying this is you, I don't know your circumstance, but sometimes, and this is on my mind because I challenged somebody this week about this, a client, I said, well, show me the book that describes what a good daughter should be, or a good wife, or a good mother, or a good this, or a good that, because you're not going to do anything but give me all the shoulds. I should do this, I should do that, I should love my children, I should. Well, guys, part of shame are the shoulds. So there is, we must get beyond these terrible things we do to ourselves that keep us out of ourselves and abandoning ourselves, so we can put the building blocks in place to get ourselves back. And part of getting yourself back is, who are you? The other thing I can recommend to everybody listening to the show, and here's an example of, I have done shows on this before, but I'm going back to this exercise because one of the ways to find the essential you is to get on, this cat. I have a darling little cat here who wants to get in this closet and maraud. And that's the scratching you hear behind me. There's not a darn thing I could do about it in an open floor planned house. Go on now, sweetheart. Don't do that. Okay? Don't do that. It is a working house. Okay. So the exercise I'm talking about going back to is to look up the longest list of values on the internet. If you just, thank you, sweetheart. If you will look up list of values on the internet and find the longest list you can, and here's how to use that list. Don't choose something you want to be. You choose something that you are 99.9% sure you are. Okay? For example, I have a friend that says, oh, I want it to be kindness. I want my value to be kindness. Well, that's just wonderful. But I know her real well, right? Now, Paul pointed out all the ways she was unkind, and I said, so you can't have that one. Certainly, as we expand in consciousness and as we merge with the highest self, which is what consciousness is all about, you'll be a lot of these things. But you aren't right now, so you can't use that one. Love too. Nobody understands love that isn't in deep consciousness work or even enlightenment. So we must have you choose things that you are. For example, I have no equivocation at all having one of my values be creativity, because I really am creative. If I am not writing and not creating and putting the puzzles of my next book together, or working on the one that I'm just finishing up, I'm watching television or a movie and I'm seeing what the director's doing and what the actors are doing and how the script is written and why it's written that way, and a lot of other things, because that's my business. And it's part of my creativity. I couldn't any more shut it off, nor would I want to, than anything in the world. Okay, I can also claim my appreciation for beauty. I love beautiful things, whether it's nature, my cat that was bothering me now, who is sitting now on my desk and being a good boy. He's sleek and gorgeous and a work of art walking around. You're getting my drift. Choose things that you absolutely are. One of the right things then you realize is when you are unhappy, you have abandoned those things. You forget them, you move past them, and you're in territory that you shouldn't be in. Because we should choose, and I'm just saying, choose 3 values that you can live and make sure that you consciously and deliberately take them into every situation. Notice when you're unhappy, you have abandoned 1, 2, or 3. And how unhappy you are is how many you've abandoned. Okay? And then go right back to them and get back on the horse. Thank you, John. I'm so glad that you're listening today. This is great. We seem to be talking each other's language. I'm glad. Okay. So going back to what I was saying about shame, where does it come from? It comes from our families most of the time. It really does. People who many parents really don't know they're shaming. I had a darling mother who really was a good mom, but she would constantly say to me, "Why can't you be more like Edna?" who's a little girl up the street. Edna, if you're listening, yes, that went on. And I don't know what mother thought Edna was, but Edna was certainly, I think, wilder than my mother knew. But I admired that very much, as a matter of fact. So it was a mother's fantasy of Edna. But still yet, hearing something like that why can't you be more like, is one of the ways we're shamed, because it says that we're not enough. Don't you understand? We get that message. And guys, here's the truth. Yeah, you are. We all good. No, I'm delighted that you understand, darling. I am thrilled to hear from you, John, and I love you all writing me, so you don't ever apologize about that. I am delighted, because sometimes in my classes when we're all together, it's real cute because I'll talk over somebody's head and I don't realize I'm doing that. And so I have people in my class that go, "Let me translate for her." And they're much more effective than I am. So I think it's adorable. So always tell me if you don't understand something. A lot of times in households, our parents are shame-based. And so we absorb that energy. We start living in that energy. And then, guys, however it happens, we start looking for evidence of our shame-based selves. So, for example, we may get out in life and, people at work are saying really good things about us, and then they say one thing in an evaluation. "Good morning, Sheila. I'm so glad you're with us." And I see Kat's picture up there too. I'm so glad that all of you all are here today. We'll say one thing, that will be, but you can correct yourself this way, and that's all the shame-based person will hear, the shame-based person. Just what they did wrong, just what they need to improve, instead of all the great things that they are, you see? Shame-based people tend to focus on their flaws. And I think that is something very much that needs to be corrected. What you're doing is, when you get out of a home like this, is you actually think you need the shame. It isn't a conscious thought. You think you're getting out of it. But the truth is, we now do it to ourselves because on some subconscious level, we think we need that. I mean, there is when shame is not pathological, when shame is a temporary thing, as it should be in all of our lives, it motivates us to do something. We can go and apologize if we've done something. We can go and decide that, well, that was not good. I will learn from that and never do something like that again. Shame can teach us. But when it is pathological, when it is excessive, and when you have learned the shame lesson too well, it actually sticks us. There's nothing to learn. We just are imploding in shame. We can be in current shame-based relationships, where our partners attack our self-esteem. Bosses can do that. And here's the thing I've always said, because my husband came from a very blaming family. Everybody was, everybody forgave themselves. Everybody loved each other, but they blamed, and I didn't come from that. So I said, let's not do that. And it has really helped. He's wonderful about that. But you've got to be with somebody who will hear you. And here's the other side of it. I always say, to make blame work, you have to have a blamer and you have to have a blamee. You have to have a blamer and you have to have a blamee. Now, what do I mean by that? If a blamee is someone who feels shame already, and here comes someone blaming and they accept it. And it was real cute in the beginning. I said, you can be the blamer, but I'm not the blamee. I'm just simply not going to take that. I will apologize if I do something, but that's it. Otherwise, I'm going to go make myself happy, and I'm not going to be blamed if I'm not to blame. Sometimes spouses blame each other because they don't understand where they're coming from. And as a spouse, you cannot expect somebody to read your mind. So I say, explain yourself to people so they'll know that you're coming from. I wouldn't let them have a misperception about you. That's not healthy for the long run of your relationship. Okay. So what happens when we come from childhoods like that, we may attract families like that currently. We learn to blame ourselves. We are the worst blamer. People who are shame-based expect others to blame them, to criticize them, to use whatever word you want, but it is expected. And the problem here is they are the worst blamer. They do a far better job than anybody else could. Is that right? Guys, no. You're using stuff that isn't true against you. But you've been brainwashed into this in some way. And now we've got to talk about it. And you have to challenge yourself not to do that anymore. I'd like to talk about what Potter Efrons say are some of the characteristics of the shame-based person. They see themselves as permanently and deeply flawed. They know they're not like other people. They know they are different. They know, now, see, all this is the operative. The Potter Efrons have it in quotes, and it is true. This is stuck energy. Stuck energy. They know, all right? They're convinced is another stuck energy word. They know that they are so bad, they're beyond repair, They know they're less than fully human. They know they will never be able to join others in a world of love, respect, and pride. These are all Pater Efron's words. I think they're great. This person, they go on to say, stuck in their shame. They don't see shame as a temporary state, which, by the way, it should be if we're going to get anything out of it. You can learn and grow from a temporary state of shame. I mean, that's the whole point of healthy shame. But the shame-based person who feels shame excessively feels it's irreversible and an endless condition. They believe that their fate in life is to suffer shame and that they are essentially defective. This person has created, they go on to say, and I fully believe this, I don't call this what they do. We'll talk about it in a minute. But the Ephrons go on, Pater Ephrons go on to say, this person has created a myth about herself or himself and the world. In this myth, there are only good and bad people, black or white truths, absolute certainties. This is a painful world, since the shame-based person believes that this person's fate is certain. He or she believes that they will live and die in shame. They may fight from time to time to escape the shame. They may yearn to gain a sense of dignity and worth, but the person who is deeply shamed frequently discovers that he or she cannot leave the world of shame for very long. Her shame, his shame, mercilessly calls them back and demands their loyalty. Very poetic, but it's true. That's the fixation on shame. The word that I took exception to is myth. That's too nice a word. You're bloomin' lying to yourself. It's a lie. It's all a lie. Maybe a lie that has been coming down in your family for quite a while. Maybe a lie your mother and your father told, what they believed. And by the way, they never talked about it, because this is something that is not talked about. We're too ashamed of our shame. Right? Well, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be gotten out there, and your lies need to be challenged. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay? Because it's just all a lie. There's nothing to be ashamed of. If you've done something, apologize. Or resolve to live differently and never do it again so we can move on. But this constant abandoning yourself, and that's what shame does. It makes you abandon yourself. All these things that I read you, those thoughts, you look at that list again, and you realize there's not one that gets to keep yourself. You've abandoned who you are. You've abandoned who you are. I have a dear client whose mother used to call her selfish. And all her life, she tried not to be selfish, knowing that she was really selfish, blaming herself for being really selfish, and covering up, trying to be extra nice to everybody. Well, of course she's selfish. Who isn't? And especially children. They're supposed to be. Her mother criticized her instead of teaching her to change and grow and let other people in and that they were as important as she was as she aged. It was poor parenting on this woman's part. This dear woman has been laboring under trying not to appear selfish. Oh, for God's sake, all the while being enormously selfish because she's focused on that instead of enjoying her life and having real interactions with people and real communication and real connection with people instead of attachments. We caught her years ago attaching to people, doing a favor for them so that they would think kindly on her and be there if she ever needed anything. That's not generosity. That's not, don't you see? Her mother created this in her. Instead of all of us just realizing that we're all selfish. Every single person walking the planet is selfish because we all have an egoic child's mind, and that's one of the descriptions of that, the part of us that still thinks like a child. But that is in negation to the fact that we're much more than that. We're the higher self as well, and selfishness is not a part of that. Although our selfishness in the ego child's mind, when we surrender it to the ascended God, we are, and have that change, becomes something else. And in the highest self, it becomes we take care of ourselves because it's the right thing to do. Do you understand? In the ego child's mind, in the highest self, whatever is here transmutes into something higher. But it is all God. The selfishness is God. And if we go, I'm going to deny it, I don't like that about myself, my mother says it's bad, and here, and you cover it up with this incredible shame, you can't accept all of you. You should be accepting everything. That should be accepted. Yes, we are selfish. Now, it doesn't come back that way. It comes back as nothing but energy. And within that energy is the decision to live a certain way, continuing to be the ego child's mind, or surrendering that and being something more. It's all energy. It's all a working of energy. That's all I do when I'm healing you, is I'm moving energy out of what has been stuck in the ego child's mind and letting it become something more. Therefore, you become something more. Isn't that exciting? There's a lot more to you than these flaws that you think you have. So what? Who doesn't have them? And if you'll stop fixating on them, if you fixate on them, they never can change. You never learn anything from them. They don't become, say, your creativity. You get it? Okay. So, yes, John has been kind enough to share that he wants to take care of his folks, and I understand that. Yeah, I get that. That's right, John. I think that we all, here's the way I look at this, my sweet. Take care of them. But the one person you're not taking care of is you, aside from taking care of them. One of the things, too, that I can say about this is that everybody has... Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Sheila. Everybody knows what they can and cannot do out of guilt, okay? But one of the things we're forgetting is everybody has chosen the life that they want to lead. And if we are giving all of our time and all of our energy and everything we love to someone else, we are not living our lives, and that's what we're here to do. So a nice balance is called for. I have a dear friend whose mother calls 40 times a day. And so that was just exhausting her. And so she decided that she was not going to pick up the phone all the time, that she would monitor the phone call, she would see when she needed to step in, and she did. So it was within reason, and she was in charge of those rules. She was in charge of those rules. So she chose what she could do as a loving daughter who did not sacrifice herself when she wasn't supposed to. So it sounds to me, sweetie, that there are just some things that you need to think through and maybe talk through with someone, you know? So good luck with that. All right. Let's go back to this whole thing about shame and the myth of it. The Potter Ephron say something I really believe, and that is nobody has to live in shame. They go on to say that there is just no such thing as a subhuman human. So all these nasty little things you're saying to yourself are just bull. There's no such thing as that. I'll go on to say something that I simply must here, and that is we live in a world of hierarchy. Our families are hierarchical, and that's being challenged right now, isn't it? It is, because we have all sorts of different kinds of family, but the traditional family was father, mother, little siblings in their pecking order. We work in businesses where there's a president, a vice president, and on down. All hierarchical. We often build our institutions and our families hierarchically. But in consciousness, there is no hierarchy. And all this, I'm better than, less than, that we play in our shame and in our narcissism, by the way, is just so much crap. Because here's the truth in consciousness. Every single thing in the world is supposed to be here and supposed to hold up their share of the energy. The pebble in the yard, I am no better or worse than that pebble in the yard. It's full of moving molecules. That's marvelous. It's being the best pebble it can be, and it's holding up its end of the path, right? It's holding up its being in God there. The dog, same thing. Being the best dog it can be, even when it's barking its head off. It's being the best dog it can be. It's no more or less than me, and I am no more or less than it. We all have our place, but the shame-based person doesn't realize that. And it plays these games of lesser than, more than, instead of realizing themselves. That's really important. The only abandonment that has been going on with the shame-based person is the abandonment of themselves. No matter what happened in the early life, that can be addressed right now and fixed. Okay. The person who is deeply shamed, the Potter Ephrons go on to say, must learn how to challenge his belief that he is intrinsically valueless. Shame-based persons become accustomed to interpreting events from the perspective of disgrace. That's what I say. You don't hear all the good things, and you don't acknowledge all the good things you do. You dismiss those. Dismiss is a big word for the shame-based person. They're gathering evidence against themselves to perpetuate the perpetuation of shame. It's very important to acknowledge this, because that's the first part to getting beyond it. Okay. So they're threatening themselves. And the Potter Ephron's gone to say, thank you, John. The Potter Ephrons go on to say that we've got to learn how to stop threatening ourselves. One of the ways you stop threatening yourselves is to stop saying these things that you say to yourself. Another way to stop threatening yourself is to find out what you really want to do and do it. And if you are taking care of parents or a husband that doesn't understand any of this that we're talking about, it doesn't matter. It only matters that you understand it and that you do what you must do for yourself. You have left yourself out of your responsibilities. And that's why we're unhappy. Because that, my dears, is the abandonment of self. Okay. Good. Yes, that's a great question, Sheila. Sheila just said, what are we gaining from sabotaging ourselves? Why do we do it? Is it a learned behavior? Indeed, it is a learned behavior. These things don't come out of the blue, sweetheart. When we are born, we're just this little bundle of undeveloped love. I say undeveloped because we're born into a fear-based family, a fear-based world, a fear-based society, and our journey, spiritual journey that we all can take up or not, is to go from that fear-based self to the love-based self. So, let's put that on the table. In that, we have to learn about our fear. You have to experience. We have to experience it. We have to understand it. We have to know what we're doing. The interesting thing to me is that we are supposed to be whole people. We're not supposed to deny our fear. We're supposed to go, wait a minute, I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? And discover what's there on a deeper level. If we feel anxiety, it's only a signpost that says, wait a minute, I'm feeling anxious here. I better look deeper to see what in the world is going on here. Why would I feel anxious here? It may be because you're standing in front of somebody kind of spooky that doesn't have your best interest at heart. It may be that you need to open a deeper level of self beyond some of the issues that are currently coming up. Whatever it is, it's actually there to help. But what we do is we take all sorts of pills. And by the way, I'm not opposed to pills. If you need them, you need them. But we try to get out of that instead of looking at it and saying, of course, that's part of me, and let's see what that's about and why it's a part of me, and doing something about it. Now, to your, pardon me, to your question, Sheila, why we sabotage ourselves. Excuse me. Why we sabotage ourselves. We can do it for a lot of reasons. Certainly, everything we see modeled in our parents or the people around us that are significant. Children are just not born saying, oh, I think I'll be OCD. It just doesn't happen. We watch other people doing that, and we go, well, they're the adults, and they're obviously afraid and need to have control of everything, so I better too. It can be no deeper than that. The adults are supposed to know. It never occurs to us, being the self-focused little children that we are, that they are having their problems too. This is for your developed brain to understand, like today. And what we do a lot of times, because we are loving people, this isn't always the case, but it is one of the things that I see in my darling clients, especially when they are new to the work, is they'll say something negative about their parent, which is true, and then they'll say, but they just couldn't help it. They went through this and they went through that. I say, stop doing that. That's not advocating for this child that didn't understand. I'm delighted the adult understands that. That's great. Put that aside for another day. You'll come back to it once you heal. But that little kid that didn't understand and that got the mistreatment or had his heart broken or was disappointed or was shamed to smithereens has to have somebody standing up for it now, and that somebody's going to be you if you're going to heal. We've got to stop making excuses for people, because I got to tell you, I've heard some really awful stories in my time. And I don't care whether somebody was injured and frustrated because they cannot do what they did before. That's no excuse for them to kill your dog. No excuse. No excuse to beat a child to death. No excuse. No excuse. We've all got to learn to be adults in this world, and if we have problems, and who doesn't, we have to learn to get over them. You understand? We have to do the work on ourselves. This is about responsibility for ourselves. There we are. Okay. People who are shame-based, the Pater Ephrons go on to say, are quite critical of themselves. They can always find something to criticize about their appearance or about their behavior or about their personality. They set really high standards for themselves, and they oftentimes can never come close to reaching them. Now, I want to go back to Sheila's question concerning all this as well. Part of the reason, Sheila, that we continue to sabotage ourselves with all this is what we're talking about right now. If we feel we're out of control, we need control. And sometimes control is just predicting the future, and we sell ourselves up to fail. That's control. So we're actually getting something out of it, because when we fail, we can go, see, I knew that. Yeah, sure. So there's a certain unhappy satisfaction out of not having any surprises there. People that are shame-based often have control issues. They often have avoidance issues. And because they're avoiding, it zaps a lot of energy. It's kind of like a pressure cooker, you know? The steam never gets out, you know, all this pressure inside, because they don't talk about it. They don't discover. They don't let these things out. And so they are exhausted all the time. If they're exhausted all the time, they get to stay home, pull the covers up over their head, just watch television in their bedroom, never interact with too many people. If they have to go to work, they interact with them and come home and clam up instead of having a nice social life and enjoying themselves. On the weekend, they sleep the whole time or work the whole time. Overwork is often one of the ways you avoid looking at yourself. So sometimes we can absolutely hate the process, Sheila, but love how we take care of ourselves once the process is over. We're a big disappointment. We're disappointed in our lives. We hate our work. We are unhappy in our marriage, whatever. We will do whatever we need to do, and that makes us feel good, even if it is drinking too much, taking drugs. It's a psychological truth that it's complicated in there. And people often make good things bad and bad things good. And I want you to write that down and try to really understand that and watch your own lives for that. Hang on just a minute, Sheila. I've got to see what you have written. They truncate this sometimes. Yeah, you like being in control. That's exactly right. I mean, that's part of this, you see. So good for you. I'm so glad. So there are a lot of things that we get out of this, sweeties. We just do, you know, not the least of which is if we are in any way defiant coming out of this, we can say we're right and they're wrong. I mean, a lot of times we will overwork and push and everything to prove our value, even after our parents are long since dead, right? We're still proving our value because we don't have any value on the inside. So we can sometimes do very destructive things out of defiance. We'll drink too much. We'll come home after a long day and drink ourselves to death. I worked that hard. We'll stay up. There's a syndrome about staying up too late because you're not taking care of yourself through the day. By God, it's my time, right? Guys, we're making good things bad and bad things good. And if you want the balanced life, it's a very important process to look at all that. You see. Good. I'm glad. Yeah, control is a really important part of all this, and avoidance. And OCD comes in to help us with those things, by the way. We can get busy cleaning the kitchen and don't have to look at ourselves, right? Okay. And Father Ephron goes on to say, when you fail because you're in this energy, guys, this is the energy of, you know, let me say this. You've written a script so far of your life. And the end is already written. Do you understand that? Because if you're in the energy of shame and you're making decisions and living your life out of that, the inevitable result is you're going to shame yourself so unmercifully or throw yourself into situations that shame you, that that's the story. The end is written. To change the end, you got to change the script. What are you saying to yourself? What kind of people are you surrounding yourself with? What are you seeking beyond these beliefs that are no longer valid? When you focus on your defects, you are missing a whole range of wonderful things that you are. You are that too. You just, again, here's that word, you dismiss them. You dismiss them. Stop dismissing the nice things you are. You see? Okay. People who are shame-based, they go on to say, are usually very, we've said that they are quite critical of themselves. We're in a section that the Pater Ephron's called How We Tend to See Ourselves. Well, people who are shame-based are very critical of themselves. Many times overly so. Because they are perpetuating their shame, they can't think of anything else to do. For example, years ago, I had a woman who really did have a lot of shame at that time. I want to tell you, not anymore. But at that time, she did. And she came in, I think it was around Christmas, and she was just, had the back of her hand pasted to her forehead like Camille. She was complaining of, she had to, buy everybody. She has lots of kids, by the way, and grandkids, so she had to buy everybody the same present. And she, to make sure everybody was happy and one didn't feel, like they were being slighted. And she had to cook all the meal herself. And it was going to, and this was for quite a crowd, by the way. And she was just exhausted. How was she all going to do this? And she did it every year. And her family just kind of ran away from her because if they came to help her, she was so stressed out, so upset that she just kind of made an enemy of everybody. She was very shame-based. She did it to all of this to be superwoman, super mom, right? She never could achieve that. While it was a beautiful meal, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed opening their presents, she made everybody miserable around her. Notice that she put tasks before people. Will you notice that? That's what OCD does. OCD puts tasks before the love of people. Wow. That's not a very nice thing to do. Not a very good thing to do for your well-being, because this world is all about relationships, right? So, when I said to her, oh, she lit. You're so dear. Sheila says, I got OCD. This is what I do at Christmas time. That's adorable. Thank you for sharing, sweetheart. You don't have to do that, because when I said to her, well, why don't you? She says she drives herself crazy. That's so dear for you to admit. When I suggested to her years ago that she ask everybody to bring a dish, she wouldn't hear of it. It's tradition, she told me, with a loud voice, by the way. It took me a couple of years to break her down so that she would listen to reason, because we had to get her beyond all this stuff, you see? Do you understand how self-sabotaging this was? I mean, it really was. So her shame drives her to overwork and overdo and over everything, and abandon herself that really wants to do this to make connections. So she doesn't have any connections made. Everybody gets mad and everybody kind of deserts her. And she doesn't ever get what she wants. It's a perfectly miserable thing that her shame created, because she abandoned herself in the one thing she was doing it for, which was love. And so I would say, please, let's get people in and let everybody bring a dish. Oh, we can't do that because of tradition. Now, this is what I want to tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, there are no enlightened traditionalists. Do you hear me? There are no enlightened traditionalists. If you are on this path, it's about change. It's about this moment of what you're learning and what you are loving. It's about change and growth and the opportunity right now. And if you are shame-based in creating something, you're going to do all these ridiculous devices to make it work, and the inevitable result is that it will not. If you create a relationship out of shame, you're going to attract somebody who's going to take advantage of that, or somebody who is equally shamed, or both. There's only one thing on the table, my dears, and that is to look at yourself and get through all of this. So we're going to talk about in just a minute. The Potter Ephrons go on to say, oh my gosh, time went so fast today. The Potter Ephrons went on to say that people who are shame-based are very self-conscious. They're sensitive to criticism. They're always on the alert for the possibility of humiliation. They expect to be judged by others, since they spend so much effort, as Potter Ephron says, condemning themselves. Because they can only attend to the deficits that others notice in them, they often dread formal events such as an annual performance review, right? They simply do not hear a combination of praise and criticism in any kind of balanced mixture. These are people, by the way, that can't take compliments. Why not? In my classes, certainly years ago, I made people stand there and take compliments and not be able to say one thing back except thank you when the compliments were over. Do that with a friend. Ask them to stand there and tell you your good points. You can't say anything back except thank you when it's all over. It's a good exercise for you. And if you feel anxiety and I think that points toward looking at this. And any shame-based feelings that are still in there. That Potter Efrons go on to say, they disregard whatever praise they receive as phony or misguided. Yeah, it always works out how it's supposed to. You're absolutely right, Sheila. You're absolutely right. And as you realize this, and it sounds like you were well into realizing this about yourself, the more you realize, the more shame drops away. It's not like it's just going to be gone like that, right? You just heal and heal and heal and heal and heal and heal and have more awareness. And then all of a sudden you don't find yourself shame-based anymore, right? And that's marvelous. That's marvelous. I get real tickled when clients come to me and they'll say, oh, this happened. And I'll say, what did you do about it? And they said, well, I started to do this, but I didn't. I did this instead. And it's just perfect. And it's exactly what I would have recommended, you know? Moving along, they accept, the Potter Efrons say, they accept criticism as deserved. They regard whatever praise they receive, I told you, as phony as phony or misguided. They compare themselves frequently with their friends, partners, and peers. The problem is they usually focus on how they're inadequate and not on the fact that everybody is as good as everybody else. There isn't any hierarchy here. Everybody's a human being. Everybody's trying in their way, even if it doesn't look like it. Right? Persons who are shame-based, the Potter Efrons go on to say, may unconsciously seek relationships that confirm their shame. That's certainly unfortunate when that happens. People who think that they are worthless are easy prey to people that will take advantage of them and that will attack them. So it's extremely important to deal with this before you enter into a relationship. All of that is extremely important. And thank you, Potter Efrons, very, very much. I'm a big admirer. However, I want to add some things because our time is short. We've got 16 minutes here. To get beyond this, you all really do need to learn to be emotionally honest. I've worked with the people in my class now for sometimes as much as 21, 22 years, and they are very honest people. So yesterday I had them do an exercise where we found out what their shames were. There were quite a list, and we had them write something that countered it. And sometimes they said, and remember, telling the truth is not 180 degrees the other way. You don't go, I will, because guys, that adamancy is the same issue. It just means you're overcompensating. So be careful of that. We want the abject truth, you know? So if somebody is saying, I feel I am ugly, physically ugly, I'm taking it an easy one right now. saying, I'm beautiful, I'm the prettiest woman in the world. Bullshit. I mean, it just is. What is true? Well, I have a real body. I am a real person. I wear makeup and I know how to do my hair, and I'm always interested in learning more about how to enhance my look and wear nice clothes. And I'm taking care of my body and eating the right food and taking care of my complexion. And I'm just proud of who I am in a very wholesome way. And that's what I have to work from, right? So that's the truth. It's real interesting because when I gave this to my class, and there were a lot of things that were very deep here, right? Not like the one I've just given you. Some of them, when they wrote that, and I helped them with the truth, said, I don't think I'm quite ready to say that yet. So I'm going to bring that to the private session and we will work on that. And that's great. That's exactly what we do. All right. So you have to be emotionally honest with yourself. If you have anxiety and you can't say it out loud, that shows you're not compatible with it. And here's a real good exercise for you to do that will, if you're tuned into yourself, that will show you whether you're being entirely honest or not, and whether there's something else to get. Make a statement. I am pretty as I am, just working off the same thing. And say, I am pretty just as I am to 100%, and add that to 100%. If you feel like there's something, I don't like even saying that. The next thing is to ask yourself why. Why? Well, because my mother always told me I was disgusting. Okay, I'll buy that. Now say the words again. I'm pretty just as I am to 100%. I still want to do that. Find the next issue. Find the next issue. Find the next issue by repeating that line over and over and over and over again until there's nothing. Sometimes this exercise can go on for days, but it's a real good form of therapy so that you can yourself find what's going on and make yourself more comfortable with the truth. The second thing that I suggest here is we've got to say, yes, I have shame. I am shame-based, and accept it. Again, what are you accepting? You're not accepting you're a bad person, which is what your ego child's mind wants you to believe. What you're accepting is the energy from that. I'll accept it. I mean, that's part of the human condition, isn't it? That we're all shamed and we're all not ashamed. We're all just everything. Why wouldn't you be everything? If God is all you are, and I'm saying God is all everything is, we're confused about it because it's the light and the dark. And we've been reared as children to feel like God's there in the good times, but it's not there in the bad times. That's a very simplistic way to think about God. God is much more than that. God's everything. Yes, and Sheila said, if you can accept the energy back, you can work on it all. That's exactly right. We have to stop denying everything, avoiding everything, not talking about it, okay? We must talk about it. That's why this forum is here. Let's talk about it. So we have to accept the energy back and accept it as part of us. You see, when you're ashamed, you almost can't do that because you're so vilifying yourself to say, yeah, I'm ugly. Oh, it's horrible. You can't do it. Why not? Stop vilifying yourself and just accept that as part of the human race. You're a lot more than ugly. You're beautiful beyond measure as well. But you're going to have to find that out through this journey, you see. After you accept all this and acknowledge again that you have it, then we become very aware of what we're telling ourselves. And we have to acknowledge the lies. We have to acknowledge the lies we're telling ourselves. So you make a statement and you go, is that the truth? And the bottom line is, no, it's not the truth. Never the truth. You know, I am ugly. I am disgusting. You remember the story about your mother finding you in your yard covered with mud, and it means more work for her, and she just lets you have it and punishes you up a good one and tells you you're not acceptable. And instead of that child saying, this is one moment in time that I got dirty in the yard when I shouldn't, that child makes it a life story, makes it part of the condemnation of her forever. Her personality, everything about her is condemned. It's one moment in time when you were dirty in the yard and your mother wasn't happy about it. Come on. And that's all any of this is. One moment in time. It is not a condemnation on your life. And that's a really important thing to remember, because what's happening now is when you criticize yourself like this, you're doing it as a self-attack and condemnation on everything about you. You are prosecuting yourself and finding yourself incredibly guilty. And that's ridiculous. Everything is about one moment. You make a mistake in one moment. Come on, guys. So I want you to pull yourself back from thinking like this, because it is about making a mistake in the moment. The kid made a mistake in the moment because she was a kid. She's not disgusting for the rest of her life, even though her mother called her that. Sensitive, loving kids tend to do what I'm mentioning to you right now. They overlearn the lesson. They don't realize it's about this moment. And you will, for the rest of your life, hear criticism and condemn your whole life relative to it. It's not right. Has nothing, you're doing something that's a very, very damaging thing to yourself, and I want you to pull yourself back from it. It's only about the moment. The next thing I want to mention is, once you do this work, you've got to replace it with a positive statement, which are words to live by. And then you must commit to these words to live by. I am going to not feel threatened when someone is criticizing me. I'm going to stand there and realize my value, because these are the things that are intrinsic to me. Again, she's 3 of them. And I'm going to hold on to those, and I'm going to bring it to the conversation. And I'm going to realize that this criticism is only about a moment in time, and something I did or did not do, or something that is misunderstood that I did, and we're going to talk about it and we're going to fix it. Now that's emotional maturity. That's how to do this well. Guys, I hope you have enjoyed this show. Please get the word around about this. I know on social media and when you're talking to your friends, you all are growing this community like wildfire. It really doesn't have anything to do with me. I show up on Sunday morning, but thank you for liking these shows on social media, for following, for sending them out to friends. I think on Blog Talk Radio, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a button where you can send it out to all your social media. We appreciate your doing that very, very much. Thank you. I have fun doing these shows. These shows are all archived, by the way, on a variety of subjects. We just talked about shame today. You too, Sheila. But we have them on every aspect of life. So listen to the archive shows on Blog Talk Radio, Facebook Live, and YouTube. They're all mounted there. And guys, we hope that you have a very safe and happy week. And thank you for everything and your wonderful support of the show, and all you dear folks that have been so honest and wonderful. John, I see your note that says true, and I want to say that we're all true blue here, and you're true too. And you take care of your dear self and your parents, okay? But don't neglect yourself. When the going gets tough, guys, I'm going to tell you this. When the going gets tough in our lives, and it's a tough world out there right now with COVID and everything else, this is the time to really take care of yourself, to really turn inward. I've often mentioned one of my favorite books, which is Man's Search for Meaning. It's by Viktor Frankl. And in that book, he talks about his experience. Well, he talks about a lot, but he talks about his experience in Auschwitz, because he was rounded up and put in Auschwitz. And under those horrible conditions, he said that he noticed that the people that had a strong inner experience were calmer and were able to withstand everything more and did a lot better, even in such a ghastly experience as that. He had a book taken away from him that he was writing or revising, and so he constantly did that in his head. And he also thought of his wife and sent her good loving thoughts across the ethers. She was in a camp, the other part of the camp. And so guys, it's really about developing the inner and taking care of yourself and doing what you need to do for you, because it's the right thing to do. Because it's the right thing to do. Not out of selfishness anymore, but because you're supposed to be here. I love you very much. By the way, here's a note. I will not be here next week. I have got to, some edits have come back from my book, so these are some of the last ones. I've got to have a good, solid weekend to do that. So I will not be here next week, but I will be here the following week. So I'll look forward to seeing you then, okay? You guys take care of yourself. I don't know what we'll talk about then, but we'll find out, okay? We'll choose something interesting. Take care. By the way, if you all have anything you want me to talk about, by all means, write me. The address is Martha@Novak. Love to hear from you. So let me know. All right, you all take care. Bye-bye. Thank you. Take care. By the way, I'm praying for you, but praying for you afterwards, okay? Because our time is about to be called.
90 seconds.
What did I say? Okay, so prayers coming your way right after this. Take care now. Bye-bye.